This morning we have a presentation that's going to be from the group that is working on the Stop 750. They have a presentation for us this morning, and I know the group, as well as I believe Ms. Outlaw, worked on a overall format in terms of the meeting for that. And with that, I see we have Mr. Brett McCain.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning,
Commissioners. For the record, my name is Brett McCain of 1813 South 29th Street. I appreciate this opportunity to provide a different perspective than y'all have been given from the plan's administrators on 750. I intend to cover four main topics this morning. One is, what is 750, including the background, relationships, and key players of the plan. The second is misrepresentations of 750. This is important because the perspective that y'all are largely given is from the plan's administrators, which is one side of this issue. And they largely present their perspective as an expert opinion. Third is what is new urbanism. This is an important topic because it's the ideology behind 750. It's also a dominant ideology of the American Planning Association and planning departments across the nation. Fourth topic is why St. Lucie County. First, what is the 750 plan? As we all know, it's a $4.25 million federal grant that was provided in 2010 to enhance regional planning. It's issued by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, specifically their Office of Sustainable Communities Initiatives. The Sustainable Communities Initiatives is a partnership with HUD, the EPA, and the DOT. The stated purpose of the grant is to improve access to affordable housing, create more transportation options, and lower transportation costs while protecting the environment. The plan is a 50-year duration and covers the political jurisdictions of Miami-Dade, Monroe, Broward, Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. So far, Indian River County and the city of Vero Beach has opted out of this plan. There's two federal requirements of the plan. One is to deliver to HUD a housing and social equity assessment, which is a demographic breakdown of many factors across the seven-county region, including age, race, and income. The 750 proponents have made it a point in many of their workshops and summits to assure the participants that this is the only federal requirement of the plan, but that's not the case. The base of the plan is on HUD's 6 livability principles. HUD's livability principles are more transportation choices, affordable housing, economic competitiveness, support existing communities, coordinate policies and leverage investment, and value neighborhoods and communities. All of these sound good on the surface, but as we dig into more details, we find out that it's not so good, such as economic competitiveness. You'll find that when they talk about economic competitiveness, they don't talk about clearing the markets and allow people to compete freely. They talk about favoring one industry or one production process over another, and oftentimes they select underperforming production processes and try to subsidize them to provide another option, which lowers our quality of life. In 2010, the South Florida and Treasure Coast Regional Planning Councils partnered to form the Southeast Florida Regional Partnership and then requested St. Lucie County's participation in and support for the grant. The stated purpose is to place the region in the best possible situation or position to capture federal funds for critical infrastructure projects designed to improve the region's sustainability as outlined by the federal partnership. In 2010, Congress provided $150 million to replicate these similar regional planning efforts across the nation. We're not the only communities that are going through this. And the two lead consultants on the 750 plan is Victor Dover and Andres Duaney and their firms. The federal expectations of this plan is to integrate housing and transportation decisions, incorporate livability, sustainability, and social equity principles into land use and zoning. It's expected to serve as a framework for future federal grants, and it's expected to support individual jurisdiction plans that match the regional vision and plan and secure agreements to support the Sustainable Communities Partnership. In the Memorandum of Understanding that St. Lucie County signed on April 13, 2010, the county understands and agrees that urban redevelopment and the promotion of infill development in Southeast Florida represents an environmental, transportation, social and economic and community development strategies for restorations of the Everglades ecosystem. The county is committed to advance the goals of the Federal Sustainable Communities Initiative program and committed to following HUD's 6 livability principles. Most of that information that I've cited so far was taken from the county's Memorandum of Understanding. The second topic that I wanted to discuss was misrepresentations about the 750 plan, notably coming from the plan's administrators. The first is that the notion that 750 is voluntary. It was completely voluntary for the Commission to opt in, and it's voluntary for the Commission to opt out as well. But it wasn't voluntary for the citizens of the county, like myself and most of you on the board today, to opt into the plan. But its voluntary statement is grossly misleading. It's stated in the same sense that taxes are voluntary. You can either pay them or be punished. Scripps picked up on this pay them or be punished notion in January when they wrote an opinion declaring that they hope Indian River County will not be punished by the withholding of federal funds for a potential Indian River Lagoon project because they did not participate in 750. It's very possible that other federal funds or our tax dollars, such as the community development block grants, beach renourishments, or others, may be withheld for nonconformance and non-participation in 750. Another misrepresentation is that 750 is a local effort. To date, most of the labor has been from the 2 regional planning councils that are partnered in this agreement, with little involvement from the people of St. Lucie County. Most of the participation is conducted by the 3 largest, most densest counties, notably Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. As I mentioned earlier, the housing and social equity assessment is not the only federal requirement, as we've been told in these workshops and summits. The 6 livability principles are also a federal requirement, which are the very foundation of the plan. 750 attempts to downplay Mr. Andres Duane's involvement in the plan. Mr. Duane is the gentleman that presented the 750 update to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council on May 17, 2013. Mr. Duane stated in this 750 update that fascism is efficient. And to be sure, nothing is efficient about fascism except for the erosion of private property rights and to benefit special interests. He indicated that Orlando doesn't have anything going for it except for maybe good government. And what we have down here is a bunch of squabbling little towns all the way down. But he continued to state that we can tie them together like nothing, presumably with such a plan. The plan facilitators argue that Mr. Duane's firm is only paid $95,000. I presume this is true. According to their calculations, they equate that to 2% involvement in the plan. They continue to argue that he is not leading any effort to writing any sections of the 750 report. We'll discuss more on this on new urbanism, and we'll find that Mr. Duane has a lot more involvement than the 2%. Another argument is that the plan is publicly driven. At their workshops and summits that I've attended, most of the workshops are filled with government employees, planners, and plan stakeholders, are basically people with skin in the game. The balance of them, or approximately 10%, did not have skin in the game, and they all seem to be unified against the direction and very concerned about the direction of this plan. And you can find, when you communicate with people outside of that run around in your circle, you'll find that 750 has little public knowledge. And by the plan's own numbers that they've released, less than 0.1% of the region has participated in the plan. That doesn't sound very publicly driven. Another argument that's come up recently has been that the plan's opposition is partisan driven. This statement is absolutely false. In fact, private property ownership, retaining local control, and consumer choice are valued by both major political parties. This partisan statement is a strategic move to undermine the plan's opposition. In this case is a loosely organized group of citizens that are concerned about the impact of this plan. And when ideas have little or no support, like 750, claiming partisanship helps garner support. We all know that when one party stakes out a position on an issue, the other party naturally will take the position of opposition. There's also been misrepresentations about some arguments coming from opponents. One is forced relocation. This idea of forced relocation has been portrayed that 750 will come to your house, force you onto a train, and send you to some high-rise. The means of this may not be accurate, but the ends most likely will be. Rather, this will be attempted through a gradual approach, or as Victor Dover's firm states, the 750 change is about steering where people will live. For example, stricter land use restrictions may decrease some property values that end up in foreclosure for lack of equity, or they choose to sell. Zoning changes may increase some property values, encouraging or steering people to sell and move. Auto subsidies and additional taxes, such as vehicle miles traveled, increase the cost of ownership. Mass transit provided at the expense of tax dollars creates an illusion of low-cost transportation. These combinations encourage, or as Mr. Dover's firm states, steers people to believe one means is more desirable than the other. Water, open space, and energy consumption restrictions can encourage unsuspecting people to move to smaller efficiencies. This is only a manipulation of the marketplace by force and coercion, but can achieve the same relocation of people. Third topic is, what is new urbanism and why is it relevant? A brief background, prior to affordable automobiles, many cities developed largely on mixed use and were thus more walkable. People generally lived at or near their place of business or where they worked. With the invention of one new production process, Henry Ford's mass-produced affordable automobiles, cities began to develop more around the needs of a car. As people climbed the income mobility ladder, they became wealthier. People desired a higher quality of life with larger living quarters and larger real property. They saw residents in neighborhoods that were socially inclusive of their desires from culture, density, religion, or any other attributes that they valued. A large portion of U.S. citizens now live in suburban communities by choice. This was a result of the market process where consumers and producers engaged in a voluntary exchange that each perceived as creating more wealth to suit their desired needs. New urbanism is simply a reaction against suburban life. They've taken suburban life and labeled it as urban sprawl and argued that it damages the environment, sacrifices natural areas, creates traffic congestion, and in other ways lowers the quality of life. But that is not the case. New urbanism offers two main goals to reverse the effects of urban sprawl. One is to create higher density living areas, and two is to reduce the amount of automobile travel by relying more on mass transit and other alternative means of transportation. New urbanism emerged in the 1970s and 80s as a reconstruction of the European city. In 1991, a nonprofit group called the Local Government Commission invited 7 architects, including Andres Duaney and his wife, Elizabeth Plater-Zyberg, to develop a set of community principles of land use planning. They presented their principles later in the fall of that year. In 1993, Mr. Duaney and his wife, Plater-Zyberg, and 4 of the other 5 architects invited to that commission to develop those principles founded the Chicago-based Congress for the New Urbanism, which is the organizing body for the New Urbanism movement. According to the Congress for the New Urbanism, throughout the 1990s, Congress for the New Urbanism established a close working relationship with HUD and its then secretary, Henry Cisneros, whom is a frequent speaker at their events. The CNU's founding charter was a source for the Sustainable Communities Partnership between HUD, the EPA, and the Department of Transportation, the very 750 funding and oversight mechanism. Miami, Florida has adopted the most ambitious new urbanist-based zoning code, which Miami, Florida has about 40% of control of the 750 region according to the population breakdowns. Seaside, Florida, you may recognize it's the home of The Truman Show with Jim Carrey, is in the Panhandle of Florida, is the first real-life example of new urbanism. Seaside, Florida, however, was an 80-acre parcel that was privately owned and privately developed, which I encourage people to do, and is the reason why I'm here. It's not the same as trying to retrofit new urbanist ideas on our community by changing our zoning and land use local options. In the mid-90s, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development adopted the principles of new urbanism in its multi-billion-dollar program to rebuild public housing projects nationwide. New urbanism is attempting to take a snapshot today and steer future lifestyles. If we had done that 120 years ago, we'd likely still be using horse and carriage. The new urbanism, they have posted a timeline, which I found very informative. And in that timeline, they recognize Dan Carey's appointment as the executive director of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council as an important milestone in 1986 for their movement. The timeline also recognizes Michael Bush's appointment as an important milestone in 1995 for their movement. Anthea Gianotes is an urban planner with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. She's also the current chair of the Congress for New Urbanism's Florida chapter. She made the following statement after receiving an award from the Congress for New Urbanism's National Conference, and I quote, "The final thought was simply that our organization is able to receive this honor because of the leadership of Dan Carey initially and now by Michael Busha, who are both passionate about city building and have had the benefit of working alongside the brightest minds in new urbanism for the past 25 years. She continued that Mike was reminiscing about how in 1986 he and Dan cold-called Andres Duaney after reading an article in the Miami Herald's Tropic magazine about this up-and-coming architecture firm with new ideas about designing and building neighborhoods again. She concluded that it was this initial contact with Liz and her husband, Andres, that began collaboration on planning, design, and coding of the human habitat in Florida. Randall Holcomb, an economics professor at Florida State University, warned of the dangers of new urbanism in an essay titled New Urbanism versus the Market Process. He went through each one of their arguments and exposed the flaws of their arguments from open space, environmental amenities, farmland pollution, traffic congestion, smart growth, and population densities. Mr. Holcomb concluded that the concerns of the new urbanists are overblown, that market forces work against the new urbanist goals, that if new urbanist goals were met, it would lower people's standard of living, not raise them, and that the new urbanist movement plans excessively to try to control the decisions of private landowners while planning insufficiently for the development of its own resources. New urbanism in the 750 plan is not rooted in any economic law or voluntary human action like the development of Seaside, Florida was. To succeed, it needs the force of government to restrict consumer choice and voluntary exchange or steer people to predefined choices. It needs to favor certain industries and production processes over others and limit consumption. Why is St. Lucie County involved? Several of the southern counties, notably Miami-Dade and Broward, who have about a 68% population control of the 750 plan, are built out and believe they need our resources. They feel they need to level the playing field by tying us together with the 750 plan. With a regional plan drafted by the southern counties to benefit the needs and desires of the southern counties, federal fund resources are consumed for their benefit, not ours. An interesting trend that has not been reported by the plan is the wealth migration of adjusted gross income across the 7-county region. The data is polled from IRS databases based on our tax returns, and the period of time was from 1992 to 2010, which showed that Miami-Dade has lost a combined $5.65 billion, including a $4.7 billion loss to Broward County and $737 million to Palm Beach. Broward gained a cumulative of $2.6 billion, thanks largely to Miami-Dade's $4.7 billion loss. But Broward had losses to Palm Beach of $2.6 billion and $421 million to St. Lucie County. Palm Beach lost $513 million to St. Lucie, $493 million to Martin, and $184 million to Indian River County. St. Lucie County, however, had a constant, sound, productive wealth growth. They gained $2.31 billion during the same period of time, and the four largest contributors were Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, and Martin County. Miami-Dade and Broward are losing wealth due to the voluntary migration of their citizens. As the density gets thicker and governments become more restrictive and more of a financial burden, the people are moving out of the area. And the 750 New Urbanist seeks to create higher densities, more restrictions, and will be thus more expensive. We've seen many times that federal priorities are often different from local priorities, and we learned a couple of months ago in the Army Corps of Engineers presentation on the Sands project to the County Commission that the Army Corps is already attempting to allocate our sands and our waters for the benefit of Miami-Dade County and their $11 billion seat at the table. It's no coincidence that the solutions being offered by all of the regional planning grants from HUD's Sustainable Communities initiatives throughout the country are offering these new urbanist goals as their solution. And that map shows where all those are going. In conclusion, planning agencies across the nation are dominated by the new urbanist ideology or movement. Sustainable Communities Initiative used new urbanism as the foundation for the partnership that funded and oversees 750. The 750 consultant Andres Duaney wrote the playbook for new urbanism, and thus writing 750 indirectly regardless of this so-called 2% involvement illusion. Planning can be effective when it reviews large-scale development's impact on a community. This is conducted in a reactionary role when plans are derived by market opportunities and brought to the planning departments. 750 is a proactive role that limits barriers to market opportunities and voluntary human action. This restricts the ability for people to increase their quality of life based on their own needs and desires. And while the 750 New Urbanist ideas may be well-intended, they have undesirable consequences for people of this county, and I'd venture to guess that they have not offered any of these perspectives to you yet. This plan will be used to direct the federal funds in the area and punish those that do not comply with the plan, or thus encouraging or steering us to conform with the ideas of the plan. And we should oppose this plan's implementation now before we experience the restrictions on and altering of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Secretary. My name is Judy Culpepper, and I reside at 7921 Plantation Lakes Drive in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Commissioners.
Good morning. Good morning.
And St. Lucie County members of staff. On behalf of our group, we want each one of you to know how much we do appreciate you spending time with us this morning in a more formal and hopefully more productive way. In addition to Mr. McCain's excellent expose on the foundation upon which this plan is built, for my part, we will cover the following areas and close with some recommendations for a sound solution. The main areas of concern to be covered are the differences in how the plan is presented versus what it is in reality, the role of climate change or global warming and why those are merely sales tools, and why this is a major concern, the economic claims for prosperity and why those are merely the sales tools and unrealistic, and finally how the energy section is flawed. Let me begin by saying, like you, we wish this exercise weren't necessary, but because it is my hope that you will remember that I'm a voice, a messenger, if you will, and while I know you'd like to shoot me, please don't.
We love you.
The plan is like the book that can't be judged by its cover, and the old saying, beauty is only skin deep. Likewise, this plan's appearance and excellent copy are just that, pretty pictures and marketing fluff with a little fear thrown in for good measure. The plan begins on the cover with 7 counties, 50 years, Southeast Florida Prosperity Plan. And we ask the questions, prosperity, how so? Which brings me to make a distinction we want to set forth from the beginning. The words often used in this plan are those from the toolboxes of wordsmiths and copywriters. Some words are used without explanation, creating a false picture in the reader's mind, while others are completely out of context and downright misleading. Prosperity means economic well-being. And while it is referred to as a desired outcome and an effect of amorphous concepts such as planning and talk of potential, there is little in the way of how this really happens or what makes prosperity. The plan just talks about prosperity, not the realistic path to it. The report generates more questions than answers. According to the plan, arts and culture are a major component of the economic section and others. On page 97, for example, this statement is made with no footnote as to its origin nor to its truth. Based on results from a recent economic study, Southeast Florida's nonprofit arts industry over the 7-county region has a $1.65 billion annual impact and provides more than 47,000 full-time jobs. What the plan doesn't reveal are the full-time wages. While the source is not cited, the one I used is, and it shows for Palm Beach County the arts create the equivalent of 3,364 full-time jobs with an average annual salary of $26,525 per year. This is just 11.2% above the national poverty level for a family of 4, and it is difficult to understand how anyone could try to make the leap from above the poverty level to prosperity. While the plan continues on about the economic virtues of the arts, those evaluating the plan just keep thinking about the starving artists and who are just scraping to get by. On the subject of economic prosperity, we do agree transportation and prosperity are linked, but we are not impressed with the supposed impacts of rail and bus transit as either economically or ecologically more attractive than today's cars, which are lower generators of pollutants. We believe if gas taxes are falling due to higher gas mileage, government has always been creative at income sources, and perhaps more toll roads could be in our future. While there may be a regional excitement about rail service, unfortunately this service is being proposed for the true Southeast region, Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade. All St. Lucie will gain from this dalliance with rail using even more tax dollars is an extra amount of train traffic each and every day. While ridership has increased on the Tri-Rail in the southern part of the region, it too is still heavily subsidized with tax dollars. At a recent planning and zoning meeting, Marcella Camblor of Sustainable Communities Initiative, along with Mr. Michael Busha, Executive Director of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, presented the 750 plan. Ms. Camblor stressed, what is 750, and provided the 5 answers you see here. In addition, she talked about a broad range of topics from shipping and ports to climate change to GDP per capita, future and current trends, and collaborative regional projects. She failed, however, to share what this plan is really all about. She and Mr. Bush have fielded questions from Planning and Zoning Board members. Mr. Grande wanted to know if we'd be in danger of losing federal funds in the future by either adopting or not adopting 750. Mr. Bush replied he thought it would be an advantage for obtaining funds. He also stated unequivocally, this isn't a plan for HUD, this isn't a plan for the Regional Planning Council. It will contain just what Marcella said, all the trends and all the research out there, and that's it. That's what's going to be in the plan, and that's all I can tell you. We'd like to bring your attention, however, to Mr. Grande's letter of April 13, 2010, addressed to the 2 chairmen of the Florida Regional Planning Councils, which were to become the 750 mega region. At that time, Mr. Grande was the chairman of the St. Lucie County Board of County Commissioners. It is clearly marked, showing this application was, in fact, to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, that would be HUD, and furthermore, quite clearly marked that this was to be a key component of the Sustainable Communities Initiative, and was intended to develop a regional plan for sustainable development. In the event the letter isn't or wasn't clear enough in its intent, then the attached MOU or Memorandum of Understanding will certainly clarify this completely. The next slide will clearly show the resolution title, the parties involved, and the purpose of the resolution. The size of the slide limits our ability to display the entire document, but pertinent clauses are included, and as before, this complete document can be found on the St. Lucie County website on the agenda for the Board of County Commissioners meeting held on April 13, 2010. For those who can't see the slide clearly, this is resolution number 10-125, a resolution of the St. Lucie County Board of County Commissioners supporting the regional planning councils of Southeast Florida in preparing a comprehensive joint application under the Federal Sustainable Communities Initiative. The Sustainable Communities Initiative, or SCI, is a federal grant program under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and the Environmental Protection Agency. The resolution makes it clear the county understood, at least at that time, understood what was expected of them. So we missed nothing in this exercise. Let me go over that resolution with you in the audience. It says in part, this new partnership is looking to multidisciplinary regional councils of the government to identify and coordinate regional strategies that provide a regional vision or plan for sustainable growth, integrate housing, water infrastructure, transportation, land use planning and investment, address energy efficiency, address the impacts of climate change through the development of mitigation and adaptation strategies, foster compatibility of sustainable built systems with the restoration of the Florida Everglades, promote the creation of equitable, sustainable communities, promote environmental protection and restoration, redevelop underutilized sites, leverage federal investment in existing communities, promote equitable, affordable housing, increase economic competitiveness. Finally, invest in health, safety, and walkable neighborhoods, whether they be rural, urban, or suburban. Once done with this long, inclusive list of items to understand about this program, following was even more. There is a clear understanding that the Sustainable Communities Initiative, SCI, should be prepared in consultation with the appropriate water resource, housing, environmental, and transportation agencies ad infinitum. Now, if you guys are still awake and with me, I bring you back to the P&Z meeting, which was receiving the 750 presentation. None of the above, save climate change, was mentioned by either Ms. Camblor nor Mr. Busha. In fact, you are reminded Mr. Busha emphatically stated, this isn't a plan for HUD. This isn't a plan for the Regional Planning Council. It will contain just what Marcella said, all the trends, all the research out there, and that's it. And that's what's going to be in the plan, and that's all I can tell you. Another glaring omission at the P&Z meeting was when Ms. Camblor was asked what documents were actually a part of the plan and where would all of the documents be found. She replied, they are all on the website. Everything was there. Every document, every meeting, it was all there. For the board's information, the very important and quite informative meeting of May 17 is and has been missing for some time. This was the day plan architect and new urbanist Andre Dwani spoke for 2+ hours. We are pleased to share an excerpt with you now when he spoke to the power structure of the decision-making process that will be anointed should you adopt 750.
By the way, these are the emerging megaregions, huge megaregions. The Northwest, this is what I would call this is the LA, San Diego, Mexican outfit. The Texas one here, here, incredibly powerful. These guys are working in all cylinders. This is a kind of oil belt. The Northwest, don't be distracted by Chicago. They're working. This is extraordinary here. The old South is going in all cylinders. The Mississippi coast is completely awoken. And then there's us. These are the mega regions. But let me now talk about the great event that actually pulled me in. The famous secession of the northern counties. The threat of secession. Don't plan us. We don't like what you're doing. You know, we don't want one more layer of government. We don't want, more bureaucracy, etc. Subsidiarity says we design who makes what decision. The city, the county, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, 750, and then Florida, the United States, and the United Nations. Okay, all the way up. By the way, I said the Earth, and people said, say the United Nations, confront that it's the United Nations. All of you can secede all you want to Orlando, which seems friendlier, but they haven't got anything going in Orlando except possibly good government. The idea that you actually secede from this plan instead of affecting those agencies is not the way to change the world. They'll crush you.
Now that we all understand that this is a Sustainable Communities initiative, we need to understand more about just what that really means. As we do that, you will learn something else interesting, and that is how eerily similar the housing and urban development livability principles are with the livability principles adopted by the Southeast Florida Regional Partnership for incorporation into the 750 Plan. One additional principle for the 750 Plan comes down from the EPA. This final principle is the requirement for the plan's project to enhance community resilience to the impacts of climate changes. In the effort to conserve time, suffice it to say the livability principles referred to in this plan were drafted and are exactly like those in the HUD office in Washington. You've heard more times than you'd like to remember how unhappy people are all over the United States of America about these regional plans. Even though science shows more pollution comes from dense city environment, and only 8% of the people want to live in a dense city environment because the feds want us to, they will steer us into the cities over time. HUD now has a program to make it less costly for local government to put into place the new zoning codes that will be required for you to do their bidding. See what is available from HUD and understand how sensitive they are about the local political problems their projects create.
The next question I'm going to direct to Shelley, and it's actually a straightforward one. It comes from Sandy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and you touched on it early on. The question is, can grant money be made available to support the efforts of cities to adopt smarter zoning codes that permit walkable neighborhoods by right?
Sandy, hello. A little shout out from the White House. Absolutely. In the notice of funds available that DOT and HUD collaborated on, we joined up something we call the Challenge Grant Program with a planning function that the Tiger II program has appropriated, and created a pool of funds that communities can seek to do more detailed land use planning, but also to prepare and adopt the codes that would allow sustainable and livable communities to happen as of right, without additional permission for each individual project. I think that Secretary Donovan's big priority is to find ways in which we can make it easier for the private sector to be able to invest in these kinds of projects and actually help us implement this big vision. And one of the biggest barriers, which I know you know about, is that often the rules of the game, the local zoning codes, actually prohibit the kind of development that we'd like to see. The mixed use, the higher density housing, or the different housing products, the local services, the local public spaces, the character and quality of communities that we know attracts people to live back in cities or live in suburban communities, live in small towns. And often the zoning codes are one of the key barriers that we hear, and this is a set of funding that can be used specifically to develop new zoning codes.
So much then for the claims that this is a public-led work. It is anything but. What it really is, excuse me, I'm back. What it really is a copy of HUD livability principles, a climate change dictum from EPA, other readily obtainable research, and a few expensive workshops where people were steered into coming to the predetermined ideological values coming out of Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, this plan cost us $4.25 million. That means each page of the 750 plan cost taxpayers $14,214 per page. What a bargain we got. Please make the astute business decision to cut our losses before this folly can cost taxpayers one more dime. How could this plan be so bad? Because it sounds so good. The operative word here is sounds. Remember, I started with wordsmiths and copywriters and their toolboxes. So now we're back to what is sustainable. What an excellent question. In your mind, it's probably something that is nurtured and well taken care of. In reality, sustainable development or smart growth is how the people in Washington want it to be. Sustainable development is a word which succeeded smart growth after people understood and began to push back just like we are now. Here is a quote from a planner and an advisor to the President's Council on Sustainable Development. In the case of the U.S., our local authorities are engaged in planning processes consistent with Local Agenda 21. But there is little interest in using the Local Agenda 21 brand. Participating in a United Nations advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy-fixated groups and individuals in our society, such as the National Rifle Association, citizen militias, and some members of Congress. This segment of our society who fear one world government and a United Nations invasion of the United States through which our individual freedom would be stripped away would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined this conspiracy by undertaking Local Agenda 21. So, we call our processes something else like comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. J. Gary Lawrence, advisor to President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development. Now let's address climate change, this portion of the plan. What is it? Why is it even in the plan? It is in the plan because it is the roost behind this entire sustainable planning movement. Only something so big and out of man's control could make us fear that every little thing we do as humans was bringing about our ultimate destruction. It's the kind of ignorant fear that would make us give up our freedom, throw away our standard of living, and go back to the caves like a Neanderthal. Best news about global warming was ClimateGate. That's what happened when the news broke about the scientists who were cooking the data books. The IPCC is the child of the World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environment Program. The IPCC, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, publishes regularly, and their arguments are persistent and plentiful. But are they based on good science? The IPCC holds it as its hypothesis, as does its parent, the United Nations, that dangerous global warming is resulting or will result from human-related greenhouse gas emissions. However, to prove such a hypothesis, the real scientists must employ the scientific method. When scientists undergo an investigation, first they formulate a hypothesis which is possible to prove false, and then they test it. Additionally, there must be the null hypothesis as well, which is the most basic and simple hypothesis, and one which is consistent with known facts. The null hypothesis to the IPCC's global warming is that changes occurring in global climate indices and the physical environment are due to natural variability in the climate in general. Then to validate this null hypothesis, In this case, that climate change is within normal parameters. You must show direct as opposed to conjectured evidence of human causation of changes that might or appear to be out of the norm. If this cannot be shown, the null hypothesis stands and is assumed to be correct. On the other hand, the IPCC takes a different approach to the scientific method. It assumes the hypothesis is correct and that the only responsible the IPCC has is to collect evidence and make plausible arguments in the hypothesis' favor. Because the IPCC is a child of the United Nations and under its control, and because the United Nations has chosen to define the change of climate as a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity, that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is, in addition to natural climate variability, observed over comparable time periods. Wow. Numerous writers have documented the strong bias of its founders and principles, its determination to find a human role in climate change almost without regard to what the data show, and the corrupting role that politics has played in that organization's history. The IPCC has been reduced to a political tool, and its self-claimed authority on climate is suspect and undeserved. In 2013, there has been much discussion about abolishing the IPCC because it's been thought that this organization has done far more to corrupt and politicize science than it has to advance it. As to climate change in this plan, we are concerned that incorporating false science into this plan may have an adverse impact on our neighbors on the barrier islands and in other low-lying areas. Should banks and/or FEMA decide to adopt such information because it's a part of this plan, it could cause people to lose all or most of the value of their property, prevent them from obtaining flood insurance, keep them from borrowing on their property, and cost local governments untold sums from lost ad valorem tax revenues. While this might steer or drive those folks to the cities, it certainly isn't right nor is it fair to anyone. Tax base lost on the barrier islands, for instance, will be made up by the remaining taxpayers. We see no reason to use false science to cost private property owners the value of their assets, nor to cause local governments to lose tax revenues. Likewise, we do not believe we should spend more money planning for a non-event like global warming. More evidence today points to climate changes which are just the opposite of the rising seas. Last year, as this picture illustrates, the Arctic ice grew by 60%. Now, according to the economics of this plan, and to be fair, with the exception of the arts and culture section, I can point to no economic rationale within the plan. The words prosperity and economic are used frequently just to describe one another, and at other times to reinforce the need for a good educational system. While Ms. Camblor spoke for the need of the region to have a business plan, it isn't clear there is one, or that one could actually be or should be prepared for a public entity in a free market society. Briefly, I would direct you to the slide which contains the people talking, which came from page 129 in the new plan. Those people are saying, let's cultivate and create jobs by investing in the creative industries. That's not how you create anything in the business world. The marketplace full of customer demand for services or products is what creates jobs. The notion that you can take another person's money, decide you can create jobs just because it sounds like a good idea, is just pure folly. Solyndra was made of this folly. Now, the region may have a functional role to play in coordinating governments and cutting through red tape, and that role will best be served in the southern end of the region. As to making a tenable environment for strong business, rather than attempting to interest businesses in the scenario report, how about we think creatively and do what stimulates businesses most? Reduce their taxes. Businesses' next favorite thing is reducing red tape for everyone, not just the projects you like, as the plan says. Learn to like successful businesses, the ones which produce the best jobs, whether you like that particular industry or not. Let the markets, not individuals, decide what to produce. Because we have an excellent source of brainiacs in our group, I asked one of them to comment for me on the energy section. Dr. Kenneth Olin Ph.D., who has worked for over 45 years in the energy field, including Florida Power and Light, readily agreed to give me a hand. His comments came in over the weekend, and I asked him if I should quote him, and he said, "Please do." He had this to say about the energy section. First, he introduced himself, and he says, "I've been involved in the energy field for over 45 years, spent 12 years in advanced technology engineering departments at FPL, and I have a hands-on knowledge of electricity generation and environmental issues. My Ph.D. is in metallurgy, and my careers have been heavily loaded in the realms of thermal chemistry. For your information, here's how the electrical system operates. The nuclear units provide baseload power, except for refueling or maintenance. The reactors are fully on all the time. Variations in power demand are met by firing the fossil units. One can store fuel to meet the load. However, electricity cannot be stored in bulk to meet this requirement." Slide number 72 will then tell you that Florida Crystal burns sugarcane plant waste, bagasse, to generate electricity and produce and process heat, not as bioethanol as the plan states. Also, most all farm equipment will not run on biodiesel, and ethanol can only be used as an expensive substitute for gasoline, up to 10% because of corrosion concerns. He says the on-site energy production was written by somebody who is completely unfamiliar with the subject. From a professionally objective vantage point, this report is a complete sham. It appears to be written with fancy illustrations to please the sponsor, HUD, and not to convey accurate information to Treasure Coast elected officials. It just cannot be taken at face value without experts in various fields making the authors justify their position. While it's been disappointing to have received critical comments like these, unfortunately, they seem to be the norm, not the exception. Several of us discussed as a group what we thought we could accept in this plan. Unfortunately, to date, we have found nothing in this plan we feel is worth the risk of St. Lucie County's exposure. We were determined, though, to leave you with some positive thoughts on what you might consider doing for the benefit of the residents in our area. We thought the simple slide might tell it all, and our thought was simply this. By all accounts, including the support documents for this plan, we have nothing in common with the densely developed counties to the south of us. On the other hand, we have much in common with our sister counties to the north and south, not the least of which is our common desire to keep our densities low, live in our single-family homes, and do less damage in so doing as to help maybe in some small way the pollution levels in the Indian River. As you can see by this chart, we are overwhelmed by these counties, and we can contribute only to them while taking away from the attention we deserve right here. We believe the best plan for us is to begin anew the real Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and let Palm Beach join with Broward and Dade. We would likely help our people get jobs and encourage business, and we are still close enough together we could actually cut through red tape and make this county again a center of commerce as it once was. Ladies and gentlemen, we leave you with these thoughts, and again, we really do want to thank you for listening, and we hope you understand. We are only here because we care, not because we want to interfere. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.